Hello, this is Blake. Welcome back to the channel. I'm showing you today some things that I got an idea from Money Mom and Sensible Living with Money Mom here on YouTube. She had shown some vintage and collectible things that she had received from her mother and other members of her family. Earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, I guess 2018, I showed you some sentimental belongings that I had inherited from my mother that were mainly things like furniture and dishware, primarily from my mother and my grandmother. So now I'd like to show you some of the vintage and collectible jewelry that I also inherited from my mother, which also came from her mother and her grandmother. So hold on, please, and we'll get started. So these are some of the items. In the 1970s, this saying, the late 60s, 1970s, war is not healthy for children and other living things, was very popular about the Vietnam War. And so my mother had a keychain from the late 60s to early 70s. This particular piece is a kind of like a watch fob from 1930 or maybe even 1920, and a cameo piece that came from my great-grandmother. And I just have it sort of arbitrarily attached with a link, not an old link, but this has got a very interesting link there, and this has got the links there too. And then these earrings go back to at least the 1970s, and they were my mother's. They used to be pierced, and she turned them into clip-ons, or so to speak, clip-ons, I guess screw-ons. I saved them, even though I wear pierced earrings. I saved them because I love them so much and they reminded me so much of my mother. She wore them quite a bit. Then this particular mosaic pin came from a friend of the family's that I went to school with in the 70s in New York City. Might have even received this in the late 60s from this friend for Christmas. Moving on. This particular ring was a pinky ring that my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, see if I can get this a little bit better organized, I guess not. Pinky ring, it's like 10 karat gold, but it is a diamond that he saved, he bought and after saving up. This particular pendant has the initials LEH, which stand for my grandmother's initials. My great-grandmother's, my great-grandmother's. So my mother saved this from my great-grandmother's collection that came to my grandmother. My grandmother won this. It is diamonds, but it's just a sort of a loose kind of stainless steel setting. But they are diamonds. She won this in a raffle. Not a raffle, but one of those sweepstakes that says send in this card and you can win this, and she won this. She was very excited about it. She always entered all kinds of sweepstakes in the hopes of winning. I have never worn it, but my mom actually did wear it, and then she gave it to me when she passed on. This particular item, I believe, is pretty old, into the 30s. It's rose quartz and aquamarine on a sterling silver chain, and sterling silver in the quartz and the aquamarine. This particular piece is an Art Deco piece, so that would put it about 1920, I believe. It's a necklace, a nice long necklace. You can see how long it goes up to there. I love this piece. It's got like a cloisonne kind of a enameled design around it with flowers. This particular piece next is just a cameo. I don't think it's a particularly good cameo, but it's an old cameo, probably 60s or earlier, maybe even earlier, belonging to my great-grandmother or my grandmother. This particular piece my mom got in the 70s, and she transformed it from a ring that it used to be a ring into this stone with a pendant with a link attachment so that you could wear it as a pendant. And then finally, what I'd like to show you are two pins that are brooches, I guess you could call them, and they're made of sterling silver, made in Mexico, both of them. My guess is that these go back to the 1970s too. They're mother of pearl. My mother and brother and I spent quite a lot of time in Mexico, probably a total of months and months. We lived there when I was very little. And then later on, we went back together as a family, and then I went back alone later on to visit with a family friend. One other thing that is a collectible piece of vintage is this thing that holds earrings and rings and jewelry cases. And then this I showed you before, but this is a hair receiver. I keep my hair ties in it now. The ties that I use for my hair, these came from a secondhand store, brand new. But I use these ties for my hair, and I keep them in this hair receiver, which is from the 30s probably. Both of these are 30s or 40s. So those are a few of the sentimental and nostalgic and items of interest that are vintage in nature. I showed you, like I said in the other video, I showed you a bunch of the furniture I've inherited that comes from the 50s and earlier. So it's been a very bittersweet journey to get these items because, of course, it means that we lost my great-grandmother who died when I was 15 and great-grandfather who died when I was 17. Then my grandmother who died when I was about 43, I think I was. And then my mother just died last in 2018. So I get these items from them because they've passed on, and that of course makes some sadness to them, but it's very nice to have some items that I can treasure that belong to my family. So thank you for joining me. You know the routine. If you'd like to subscribe, please do, and hit the notification button. Also give this video a thumbs up. Thank you very much.